The courtroom buzzed like a storm, waiting to break. The air was thick, the kind that presses down on your chest, making every breath feel heavier than it should. People whispered in low tones. Phones clutched tightly. Reporters lined up with their cameras, ready to catch even the smallest flicker of emotion from the man everyone had come to see. Kody Brown. Outside, a sea of cameras flashed. Microphones pointed in every direction as news anchors shouted over one another. Breaking news from Flagstaff Courthouse. Kody Brown faces judgment today in the case that could change everything for the sister wives family. The buzz of voices, the clicks of shutters, and the murmur of curiosity created a strange kind of music that only chaos can compose. Inside, though, everything was tense, quiet, too quiet. Kody sat at the defense table, head slightly bowed, his blonde hair neatly combed, but losing its shine under the courtroom lights. He wore a dark navy suit, the kind of color people wear when they're trying to look serious or invisible. His jaw was clenched, and though he tried to appear calm, his hands betrayed him. They shook ever so slightly as he adjusted the papers in front of him. His eyes didn't move much, but when they did, they flickered toward the door, as if he was waiting for someone who would never walk in. The doors creaked open, and whispers rippled across the benches. In walked Christine, then Janelle. Both kept their heads high, shoulders squared, but their faces told stories that silence never could. Years of frustration, disappointment, and hurt had hardened them. But beneath it all was something else: determination. They weren't here for revenge. They were here for truth. Meri entered next. Quiet, unreadable, her steps measured. And behind them Robin appeared. Her eyes red, as if she hadn't slept in days. She hesitated for a moment at the doorway, clutching her bag like it was a shield. The sight of all four women in one room again sent a shock through the courtroom. People shifted in their seats. Some whispered, "Is this really happening?" For years viewers had seen these women smile on camera, laugh together, and speak about family unity. But this was not the same sister wives family that America had fallen in love with. This was a broken house, finally facing its cracks in public view. The bailiff's voice echoed sharply through the room. "All rise. Court is now in session." The Honorable Judge Meri Collins presiding. Everyone stood. Everyone except Kody. It wasn't rebellion. It was disbelief. His eyes locked on the judge's bench as she entered, her black robe flowing like a shadow of authority. She looked around the room, scanning every face before taking her seat. "You may be seated." The shuffle of feet and creak of benches followed. Cameras were not allowed inside, but every journalist in the room scribbled furiously. They knew that every glance, every sigh, every small reaction could make tomorrow's headlines. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Kody. "Mr. Brown," she said evenly, "you are aware of the charges brought against you?" Kody swallowed hard. His voice came out low. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge nodded, her eyes calm but sharp. "Then we'll proceed." At that moment, a chill seemed to pass through the room. For a long time Kody Brown had been the man in control, the decision-maker, the patriarch, the one who built an empire of reality television on the foundation of family and faith. But here, in this cold courtroom, he was just another man accused of betrayal. A whisper spread among the spectators in the back rows, fans of the show, curious locals, and former supporters who had once admired his confidence. Some still held sympathy for him. Others were angry, betrayed by the image they had believed in for years. Christine's eyes never left him. She sat upright, her face calm but unreadable. To the world, she had already moved on, built a life of independence, found her voice. But in this courtroom, she was reliving every lie, every broken promise that had led to this very moment. The prosecutor, a tall woman with a calm but cutting tone, stood up. "Your Honor, the case before us is one of deception, control, and financial manipulation within a family once held up as an example of love and unity. We will show that Mr. Brown misused shared family funds, concealed accounts, and betrayed the trust of the very people who built his success." The words hung in the air. Kody's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering something to him, but Kody didn't respond. His gaze drifted toward the witness area where his wives sat. For a moment, his eyes met Christine's. It was a silent exchange, full of pain, guilt, and history. She didn't look away. Outside the windows, clouds rolled in over the mountains, casting long shadows across the courtroom floor. The day seemed to grow darker as the truth loomed closer. In the front row, a young reporter typed rapidly. Her notes read, "Brown appears tense. Family divided, atmosphere explosive." The judge took a sip of water before speaking again. "We will begin with opening statements." Kody leaned back slightly, breathing heavily, as if each word around him was a blow. He had faced cameras, critics, and even family confrontations before. But nothing like this. This wasn't a producer asking for a retake. This wasn't a storyline that could be edited. This was real, raw, and final. He looked down at his hands. For years, those hands had signed deals, built homes, and held the hands of wives who once believed in him. Now they gripped the table like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Christine glanced toward Janelle, who gave her a small nod. The kind that says, "We're ready." They weren't afraid anymore. They had spent years living in the shadows of Kody's decisions. Now, under the light of justice, they were standing tall. As the prosecutor spoke, painting a picture of manipulation and control, Kody's expression hardened. He knew that every word hit deeper than the last. Every accusation reopened old wounds that the cameras had never captured. At one point, Robin wiped her tears quietly, her sobs muffled. Kody noticed, his eyes softening for a moment, a flicker of the man he once was. But it was too late for sympathy. Too many bridges had burned. Too many hearts had been broken. The judge glanced at the clock. "We'll take a short recess," she announced. The gavel struck sharply, echoing through the room. As people stood and stretched, Kody remained seated. He stared ahead, eyes unfocused. His lawyer leaned over. "You okay?" he whispered. Kody didn't answer. He just muttered it wasn't supposed to end like this. Outside the courtroom doors, reporters scrambled to file updates. Fans of Sister Wives flooded social media. Kody Brown in court. Christine faces Kody again. Shocking scenes inside the courthouse. Inside, though, Kody stayed perfectly still, his thoughts spiraling. For the first time, he wasn't the man in control of the narrative. The story, his story, now belonged to the world. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above him. The walls seemed to close in. Every face that had once adored him, every promise he'd made, every moment of fame, it all crashed down at once. And in that suffocating silence before the next session began, one truth became clear. This wasn't just a trial about money or fame. It was about betrayal, accountability, and the fall of a man who thought he could control everything, even the truth. The storm outside hadn't yet broken, but inside that courtroom, it already had. The courtroom lights glared down like spotlights. But this time there were no cameras rolling for TLC, no friendly producers whispering, "Let's do another take." This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was real life, unfiltered, raw, and merciless. Kody Brown, once the golden-haired patriarch America either admired or questioned, sat quietly, his eyes hollow. Just a few years ago, he was the face of plural marriage on Sister Wives. He was confident, proud, always talking about faith, family, and doing things differently. Millions tuned in every week to watch his large family navigate love, jealousy, and unity. He had become a household name. But as the judge returned from recess, the contrast couldn't have been starker. The man who once smiled into television cameras was now just another defendant, accused, exposed, and surrounded by those he once called family now seated against him. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Lewis, rose with a measured calm. "Your Honor," she began, her tone slicing through the silence. "What we have here is not just a financial dispute. It's the unraveling of years of deception, behind a public image built on trust and faith." She turned slightly, gesturing toward the gallery where Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat shoulder to shoulder. For over a decade these women stood by Mr. Brown, believing in a dream, a family united by love and equality. But behind the scenes that dream became a business. And like most businesses built on control, it eventually collapsed. Kody shifted in his seat. His jaw flexed. He wanted to interrupt, to defend himself, to say it wasn't true, that he'd done everything for his family's good. But his attorney placed a steadying hand on his arm, silently telling him to stay quiet. Miss Lewis clicked her remote, and a screen at the front of the room lit up with a picture. A smiling Kody surrounded by his wives and children on the set of Sister Wives. The image was warm, joyful, picture perfect. This, she said, was the face of unity that America saw. But what they didn't see, she clicked again, were the private accounts, the missing funds, and the manipulations that tore this family apart. The next slide appeared. A copy of a bank statement. The amounts made the spectators gasp. Tens of thousands of dollars, quietly moved from joint accounts into one under Kody's sole control. Christine closed her eyes for a moment. Janelle's lips pressed together, holding back emotion. Kody's lawyer, Mr. Reeves, rose quickly. Objection, Your Honor. This evidence is being presented without full context. The judge looked unimpressed. Overruled. Continue. The gavel's soft tap echoed, sealing Kody's fate a little tighter. Outside the courthouse, social media exploded. #Kody Brown trial trended within minutes. Fans who had once defended him now flooded the comments with disbelief. How could he? We believed in him. He fooled everyone. Inside, though, there was no noise. Only the steady hum of the air conditioner and the occasional click of Miss Lewis's heels as she walked across the floor. She turned again toward Kody, her voice steady. Mr. Brown's story is not unique. Power without accountability destroys families. And in this case, that power came not from wealth or fame, but from control, emotional and financial. Christine's eyes glistened as she remembered the early days. Back then, they were a family built on shared belief. They'd lived modestly, supported each other, and believed Kody's dreams would lift them all. But slowly things changed. When the cameras came, Kody started talking more about image, how they looked, how they were perceived, how the world should see them. Then came contracts, sponsorships and investments. At first everyone trusted him to handle the money. After all, he was the head of the family, the spiritual leader. But when questions about missing funds surfaced, his answers became short, defensive. You just don't understand the pressure I'm under, he'd say. I'm protecting this family. Now, years later, those words echoed in Christine's head as the prosecutor read through the evidence line by line. Kody clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to explain, to say he wasn't a thief, that it was all for them. But how could he? They wouldn't believe him now. Then Miss Lewis said the words that hit the hardest. Mr. Brown didn't just hide money. He hid control. Control over people, decisions and futures. And when his family began to question him, he did what most powerful men do. He isolated them, one by one. Christine felt her chest tighten. Janelle glanced at her, and nodded slightly. The truth hurt, but it also freed them. Kody looked up, meeting Christine's eyes for the first time that day. For a fleeting second, there was something there. Regret maybe, or just the weight of realization. She looked away first. The judge called for a short break. Kody stayed seated again, motionless. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps fading as the courtroom emptied. His lawyer whispered, "We'll appeal this. It's not over." But deep down, Kody knew, it was over. He thought back to when Sister Wives first began. He remembered sitting on that worn leather couch, his wives around him, laughing as the producers adjusted cameras. He remembered the pride he felt when the first episode aired, seeing his family's story on national TV, thinking they were showing the world something beautiful. Now that same pride felt poisonous. What had started as a dream had turned into a performance, one that swallowed the real family whole. He remembered moments that didn't make the final cut, arguments about money, tears over neglect, Christine packing her things, Janelle quietly crying when no one was watching. He remembered how he told them all, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." But in truth, he didn't. When the courtroom doors opened again, the energy had changed. The audience had grown. More reporters, more onlookers, more judgmental eyes. The world was watching every second. Kody stood when instructed, but his movements were slow. He felt the years of leadership, fame and failure, pressing down on him like a weight he could no longer carry. As the judge re-entered, the rustle of clothing filled the air. "We will proceed," she said firmly. Miss Lewis continued. The defense will have its chance, but the facts are plain. Mr. Brown's actions led to the emotional and financial suffering of his own family. He profited from their pain, and today we hold him accountable. Kody's lawyer countered with practiced confidence. Your Honor, my client acted with good faith. The funds in question were used for family expenses, business obligations, and show-related costs. There was no intent to harm anyone. The judge nodded. Intent is important, but so is impact. Kody's breath caught. Impact. That single word hit harder than any accusation. He thought of his children, the tears, the distance that had grown between him and everyone he loved. He had always believed he could fix things. That one grand gesture, one explanation, would make everything right. But now, sitting under the heavy eyes of the court, he realized some things can't be fixed, only faced. The hearing adjourned for the day, but the story was far from over. Outside, as Kody exited under a shield of flashing cameras, reporters shouted questions. Mr. Brown, do you regret what you did? Will you apologize to your family? Was the money worth losing everything? He said nothing. The only sound was the echo of his shoes on the courthouse steps, each one a reminder of the long road that led him here. Inside, Christine, Janelle and Meri gathered their things. Robin lingered behind, looking torn between love and disappointment. For the first time, none of them followed Kody, and as he disappeared into the crowd of cameras and chaos, one truth settled like dust in the air. Fame had built Kody Brown's world, but reality was tearing it down. The storm that began quietly in session 1 had now begun to roar. The next morning, the courthouse steps were already swarming before sunrise. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, breath fogging in the cold mountain air, waiting for the man whose family drama had once filled living rooms across America. The air smelled like rain and nerves. Today's the big day, one journalist whispered. They're revealing the evidence. When Kody Brown arrived, cameras flared like lightning. He didn't wave, didn't speak, didn't smile. His face was pale, unreadable. The man who used to strut proudly onto a television set now walked with his head down, flanked by his lawyer. The silence of his arrival said more than any headline could. Inside, the courtroom felt heavier than before. Everyone sensed something monumental was about to unfold. Christine and Janelle sat together again, hands clasped tight. Meri stared at the empty witness stand, while Robin kept her gaze fixed on the floor. No one spoke. Even the air seemed to be holding its breath. At exactly 9 o'clock, the judge entered. All rise. Every wooden bench creaked in unison. You may be seated, she said. Then she looked directly at Kody. Mr. Brown, we will now review the official charges and the supporting evidence. The prosecutor, Miss Lewis, stood up slowly, papers in hand. She moved with the calm certainty of someone who knew the weight of her words. Your Honor, she began, we present evidence that over a period of 3 years Mr. Kody Brown diverted more than $750,000 from shared family accounts into private holdings, without the knowledge or consent of his wives. These funds were allegedly used for personal purchases and investments unrelated to family needs. A gasp rippled through the audience. The number itself was shocking, but it was the betrayal behind it that drew tears from the front row. Kody's lawyer immediately objected. Your Honor, these numbers are being exaggerated. Overruled, the judge said swiftly. Proceed. Miss Lewis continued, walking toward a large screen at the front of the room. Let's start from the beginning. The first slide appeared, a check dated 2 years ago, signed by Kody and labeled Brown Family Fund. The next slide showed a withdrawal for the exact amount, transferred into an account under Kody Brown Holdings LLC. Each click of that remote felt like a hammer hitting the table. Click, another document. Click, a luxury vehicle purchase. Click, receipts from resorts, restaurants and real estate listings. Christine's breathing quickened. She had always known money was missing, but seeing it displayed like this, in public, undeniable, irrefutable, was a wound she didn't expect to reopen. Miss Lewis looked back at the judge. Your Honor, the pattern is clear. The funds intended to support 18 children and 4 households were redirected to a single man's private ambitions. The courtroom fell silent again. For years Kody had spoken about fairness, about balancing love and finances equally among his wives. It was his mantra, his philosophy, his brand. And now, in front of everyone, that philosophy was collapsing. The judge turned toward Kody. Do you wish to respond to these allegations? He hesitated. The cameras weren't there, but every pair of eyes felt like one. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, he began softly. I didn't steal from anyone. The accounts were complicated. The family structure was complicated. I was trying to organize things, organize. Miss Lewis interrupted. By hiding funds in your own name? Kody's jaw tightened. It wasn't hiding. It was protecting. The show, the contracts, the pressure. You don't understand what it's like to manage a family that big. Miss Lewis didn't flinch. You're right, Mr. Brown. Most families don't need corporate bank accounts to survive. But they also don't have one person controlling them. A soft murmur rose from the crowd. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. Christine felt her eyes burn. She could still hear his old words echoing in her mind. Trust me, I know what's best. Those words had been the walls of her life for decades, and now they crumbled like dust. Then the prosecutor called the first witness, Janelle Brown. She walked to the stand slowly but confidently. Her voice was steady. Janelle, how long were you married to Mr. Brown? Almost 30 years. And during that time, did you have equal access to family finances? No. Kody handled all the main accounts. We trusted him. Did you ever question where the money was going? I did, she said, taking a breath. When payments for the kids' college tuition were delayed, I asked. He told me not to worry, that he was handling it. But months later I found out the funds were gone. Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't cry. She looked straight ahead, her composure steady. I wasn't angry about the money. I was angry about the lies. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. You may step down. Next came Christine. Her walk to the stand was heavier, slower. Like every step carried a memory. She swore in, then took her seat. Mrs. Brown. Miss Lewis began. You left the family before this case began. Why did you decide to come forward now? Christine looked over at Kody. Their eyes met briefly, but there was no warmth left. Because it wasn't just about us anymore. It was about accountability. For years we were told that family came first, but family doesn't mean hiding secrets or controlling people. I loved Kody, but love doesn't mean silence. The entire courtroom was still. Even Robin wiped her eyes quietly. Christine continued. When I confronted him about the missing money, he told me I was being ungrateful, that I didn't understand what he sacrificed. That's when I realized, it wasn't a partnership anymore. It was a kingdom, and he was the only one with a throne. Her voice trembled, but she didn't break. When she stepped down, half the room was in tears. Kody looked as if he'd been drained of life. He stared at his hands again, the same way he had in the first session. His lawyer whispered urgently, you need to keep your composure. But inside he was unraveling. He remembered the first time he ever signed those checks. He hadn't thought of it as stealing. He had thought of it as maintaining control, making sure things didn't spiral. But over time, it became habit, then entitlement, then addiction. The judge called for a recess. Reporters bolted outside to deliver their updates. Within minutes, the internet was flooded. Janelle and Christine testify against Kody Brown. Courtroom bombshells in sister wives scandal. Inside, Kody sat motionless. His lawyer whispered, we'll fight this. We can argue intent. But he barely heard him. His mind was far away, back to when things were simpler. When faith and family had been his whole identity. He could still hear the laughter of his children. The sound of his wives cooking dinner together. The quiet evenings where everything felt whole. Now, all that was gone. When the break ended, the judge re-entered and looked over the room. Her face was calm, but her tone was stern. The testimonies and financial documents presented here will be reviewed overnight. Tomorrow we move forward to the final phase. Determination of guilt. A single phrase that made everyone tense up. As the court adjourned, Christine and Janelle stood side by side, surrounded by quiet support from their loved ones. Meri walked past Kody without a glance. Robin hesitated for a moment, looking torn. her heart pulled in two directions. Kody rose slowly. He buttoned his coat, but his movements were mechanical, empty. When he turned to leave, he caught his reflection in the polished courtroom glass, a man he barely recognized. Outside, the crowd waited. Microphones flew forward. Mr. Brown, how do you respond to the testimony? Did you take the money? Do you have anything to say to your family? He said nothing. His car door slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gavel. And as the vehicle drove away, the world knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow's session wouldn't just decide Kody Brown's fate in court. It would decide whether the man behind Sister Wives could ever rebuild what fame had destroyed. The storm was no longer coming. It had arrived. The courtroom was utterly silent as Janelle Brown took the stand. Her face was calm, but her eyes told a story of pain, exhaustion, and quiet strength. The same woman who once stood beside Kody, raising children and defending his choices, now faced him from across the courtroom, as a witness, not a wife. Kody Brown, she began softly, her voice steady but thick with emotion, is not the man the world believes him to be. Every head in the courtroom lifted. The reporters' pens froze mid-air. Even Kody shifted uneasily in his seat, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. Janelle continued, describing years of manipulation, financial control, and emotional distance. She talked about how Kody's promises of unity became chains of control, how he kept tight hold over the family's finances, while his wives struggled to provide for their children. He would tell us it was all for the family, she said, looking toward the judge, but the truth is, it was all for him. Her voice didn't tremble. Each word was like a quiet explosion, sharp, precise, impossible to ignore. As she spoke, the courtroom screens displayed financial documents, accounts that had been drained, checks signed in secrecy, and property transactions linking Kody to a hidden bank account under an alias. Gasps filled the room as the evidence appeared one by one. Kody's attorney objected, arguing that the information was incomplete, that the funds were for shared family expenses. But Janelle's attorney countered immediately, showing transfers that occurred late at night, money moved days before legal separations, and withdrawals with no clear records. The tension in the courtroom was electric. Kody clenched his fists, his jaw flexed. Every time Janelle looked in his direction, his face hardened just a little more. He wanted to speak, to shout that she was lying, but his lawyer's firm hand on his shoulder kept him seated. Then came the moment that broke through his silence. Janelle reached into her folder and pulled out a single piece of paper, a handwritten note. It was short, torn at the edges, but unmistakably written by Kody. The judge nodded for her to read it aloud. With a deep breath, she said, "If you walk away from me, Janelle, don't expect anything. You'll lose the house, the money, and your place in this family. Choose carefully." The words echoed like thunder. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Some of Kody's own children, sitting in the back rows, looked down in shame. A few began to quietly cry. Cameras zoomed in on Kody's expression, a mix of anger and humiliation. The judge leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowed. "Mr. Brown, did you write that note?" Kody looked away. "I don't recall," he muttered. But it was too late. Everyone knew he did. The courtroom shifted. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control, power, and betrayal. The foundation of a man who had built his fame on family, but ruled it through fear and manipulation. Janelle continued, speaking now about the emotional toll. She told the court about nights she cried alone, the children asking why daddy doesn't come around anymore, and how each of Kody's decisions made the family feel smaller, divided, and forgotten. Her words weren't just testimony. They were years of silence finally breaking free. When she finally stepped down from the stand, the room erupted into murmurs. Reporters whispered frantically into microphones, capturing every moment for the evening headlines. Kody sat motionless, staring down at the table. The man who once commanded attention now looked lost, cornered and helpless. His image of control was slipping, fast. But the biggest blow hadn't even come yet. As Janelle walked past him, she paused for just a moment. She didn't look at him directly, but her words carried enough weight for everyone to hear. "You taught us loyalty, Kody, but you never practiced it. The sentence hit like a hammer. Even the judge's eyes lingered on Kody for a long moment before calling the next witness. And as Janelle exited the courtroom, the cameras followed her, flashes lighting her face as the world watched a woman who had finally broken her silence. Inside, Kody sat alone, his empire cracking around him. For the first time he realized. This wasn't just a legal fight. It was judgment day for everything he'd built, and everything he'd destroyed. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by reporters before sunrise. Word had spread that Kody Brown's children were going to testify, and the world was waiting to hear what they had to say. The same children who once smiled for cameras on Sister Wives were now about to face their father under oath. Inside, the air felt heavier than ever. Kody sat rigid at the defense table, his expression unreadable. His eyes darted toward the door every few seconds, as if hoping one of his children might refuse to testify. But when the first one walked in, his eldest son Logan, the tension snapped like a wire. Logan took a deep breath before sitting down. His face showed calm, but his shaking hands betrayed years of buried emotion. The judge nodded for him to begin. Logan's voice was low but steady. Growing up, I always wanted to be like my dad. He was strong, confident. I thought he loved us all equally. But that changed. He paused, looking toward Kody. He started caring more about control than about love. The courtroom was silent. Every word seemed to echo off the wooden walls. Logan described moments that viewers of the show never saw. Arguments off camera, broken promises, and emotional manipulation that divided the siblings against each other. He made us compete for his attention, Logan said. One week he'd praise one wife's kids, and the next week he'd ignore the rest. It was like love was a game you had to win. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His attorney whispered something in his ear, but he didn't respond. His jaw tightened as Logan continued. After the show ended, Logan said, things got worse. Money disappeared. He blamed everyone but himself. We stopped hearing from him, unless he needed something. I used to defend him, but not anymore. A few quiet gasps rippled through the gallery. Some of Kody's younger children sitting in the back row wiped away tears. Cameras zoomed in on Kody's face. A mixture of anger, denial, and something deeper, guilt. Then came another shock. The next witness was Christine's daughter, Isabel. She walked in nervously, clutching a small silver pendant around her neck. Her mother gave her a reassuring nod from the benches. When asked if she wanted to share her experience, she hesitated, then spoke softly. My dad wasn't there for me when I needed him most. The judge asked her to elaborate. Isabel's voice trembled. When I had my surgery, he didn't come. He said it was too hard for him. But it was harder for me to understand why my dad wouldn't show up. A collective gasp filled the room. Even the reporters lowered their pens for a moment. That line hit everyone, including Kody. He blinked rapidly, his eyes glassy, but he didn't look up. Isabel continued, her tone growing stronger. He always said family was everything, but when things got real, he wasn't there. Not for Mom, not for us. As she stepped down, tears streamed down her face. She didn't look at her father once. Next came Gabriel, Janelle's son. He walked in with a quiet intensity, his shoulders squared, his eyes locked on Kody. Everyone could feel the storm brewing. When asked to describe his relationship with his father, Gabriel exhaled sharply. Non-existent, he said. He stopped being a father a long time ago. The judge raised an eyebrow, asking him to explain. Gabriel's jaw clenched. During the pandemic, I tried to talk to him. I told him how his rules were tearing our family apart. He didn't care. He said I was disrespecting him. He hung up, and that was it. He never called again. The room fell into complete silence. For the first time, Kody's confident mask cracked. His lips trembled. His hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Gabriel's next words were like knives. He always talks about loyalty, but loyalty doesn't mean control. It means love. And he doesn't know what that is anymore. Some in the audience quietly clapped before the judge restored order. As Gabriel walked out, Kody's head dropped. He didn't look up. His attorney whispered, "Don't react." But it was too late. The damage was done. One by one, his children painted a picture of neglect, emotional distance, and betrayal. Each testimony, was another nail in the coffin of his image. By the time the final witness left the stand, even the reporters seemed stunned. The judge took a brief recess. People in the courtroom whispered. Was this the end of Kody Brown as the world knew him? Kody sat frozen. His world, the family he once controlled, the reputation he once cherished, was slipping away faster than he could grasp. And when he finally lifted his head, his eyes weren't angry anymore. They were hollow. Because deep down, for the first time, Kody Brown knew something he had spent his life denying. He wasn't the victim of betrayal. He was the cause of it. And as the gavel struck to resume court, one thought lingered in everyone's mind. If the children could turn against him this completely, what would happen when the final verdict came? The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the judge returned from recess. The quiet murmur of the crowd slowly faded when the prosecutor stood up holding a small USB drive. Her tone was calm but chilling. Your Honor, she said, we have a new piece of evidence, an audio recording that directly involves Mr. Brown. It was recovered from a phone belonging to a former production crew member of Sister Wives. With the court's permission, we'd like to play it. Kody's attorney immediately objected. Your Honor, that recording was obtained without consent. It violates privacy laws. The prosecutor countered swiftly. The individual who recorded it has already provided a signed release. The conversation took place during a public filming session. It's admissible. The judge, clearly intrigued, adjusted his glasses. Proceed. Every camera turned toward the screen. Kody sat completely still, his eyes narrowing. He knew what was coming. The audio began. There was a brief crackle. Then came Kody's unmistakable voice. Confident, dismissive, the voice of a man who believed no one could touch him. They'll never leave me. They need me. All of them do. Without me, they're nothing. Gasps erupted around the room. Even Kody's lawyer's head dropped into his hands. The recording continued. Money? Please, they wouldn't even have homes if I didn't control the accounts. If they want to walk out, fine. But they'll walk out with nothing. The air in the courtroom grew thick. Christine, Janelle, and several of the children were visibly shaken. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Kody looked furious now. Red-faced, jaw tight, hands shaking. He leaned over to his lawyer, whispering harshly. That was taken out of context. But the damage was done. The judge motioned for silence as the recording played further. I built this family. I made them famous. They owe me everything. The clip ended with a door slamming, followed by a woman's muffled sob. For a moment no one spoke. The courtroom was frozen in disbelief. The prosecutor broke the silence. Your Honor, this recording clearly demonstrates intent, financial and emotional control over the entire family. It supports the testimonies given by Mrs. Brown and their children. Kody's attorney stood, his voice strained. This is manipulation. Your Honor, a snippet from years ago, edited and twisted. But even as he spoke, the jury's faces told the story. They had heard enough. The words on that tape matched everything the witnesses had said. Every pattern, every accusation. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Brown, do you wish to comment on this recording? Kody's lips parted, but no sound came out. He looked from the judge to his family, the people he once commanded, and saw nothing but disappointment in their eyes. Christine, sitting in the front row, wiped away tears. Janelle just shook her head, whispering something under her breath. Finally, Kody managed a single line. That recording doesn't show the whole story. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. Then tell us the whole story, Mr. Brown. But he didn't. He just looked down at his hands. His confidence shattered. The judge called for a brief recess again. But this time no one moved. The audience stayed seated, stunned by what they had heard. Reporters whispered about the confession tape that was sure to dominate every headline that night. Outside, fans who had gathered around the courthouse were already reacting in disbelief. Clips were spreading online. Hashtags like #KodyTape and #BrownFamilyTrial were trending within minutes. Inside, Kody sat slumped in his chair, staring blankly at the table. His lawyer tried to whisper strategy, but he didn't respond. His mind was spinning, racing back to the day that recording was made. The day he let his arrogance slip out in front of the wrong person. He had always thought his fame protected him, that his charm, his TV presence, his story of faith and family would cover every flaw. But now his own words had become the knife cutting through the illusion. As court resumed, the prosecutor delivered the final blow. Your Honor, she said firmly, what we've seen today is not the story of a misunderstood man. It's the story of control, ego, and deception. The tape proves what every witness has said. Kody Brown believed he was untouchable. But today, the truth is catching up. The judge nodded, his tone solemn. We will adjourn for the day. Court will resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Mr. Brown, I advise you to prepare your defense. Carefully. As the gavel struck, the sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Kody didn't move. He didn't look up. He just sat there, motionless, as his family filed out one by one, not a single glance in his direction. Outside, the cameras waited, the world watching live, and as Kody was escorted out by security, a single question hung in the air. Was this the moment the empire finally fell? Because after that tape, no one, not even Kody Brown, could hide from the truth anymore. The next morning, the courthouse felt different. Heavier, quieter, as if everyone knew something irreversible had shifted. The so-called confession tape had changed the entire direction of the trial. Kody Brown arrived early, dressed sharply in a dark suit and navy tie, but no amount of polish could hide the exhaustion etched into his face. He glanced around the courtroom, eyes searching for anyone. Christine, Janelle, even one of his children, who might look back at him. But no one did. Every seat behind him was filled with reporters, spectators, and former fans who now looked at him like he was a stranger. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Kody hesitated, then slowly rose, trying to steady his breathing. The prosecutor was ready, confident, calm, a stack of documents in hand. This was the day she planned to break him completely. Brown, she began as she approached the stand. Yesterday, the court heard an audio recording in which you described your family as dependent on you and claimed ownership of their finances and futures. Today, you'll have the chance to explain yourself. Let's start with something simple. Do you recognize your voice in that recording? Kody's throat tightened. He forced a small nod. Yes, he said softly. That's me. But it was taken out of context. Context? The prosecutor echoed, pacing slowly before the jury. In what context is it acceptable to say, they'll never leave me. They need me. Without me, they're nothing. Kody straightened. It was a private conversation. I was frustrated. The show was falling apart, and my family was under pressure. I was venting. So you were venting, the prosecutor repeated, leaning closer. You weren't serious? No, Kody said quickly. I didn't mean it literally. She gave a small knowing smile. Then why do your bank statements? She lifted a document, show money being transferred to a private account under your control. Just days after several of your wives expressed wanting to separate. The room tensed. Even Kody's lawyer looked uneasy. That's not true, Kody snapped. Those were family funds. I was managing them, the prosecutor's tone hardened. Managing them? Or hiding them? Kody's jaw twitched. You're twisting things. Am I? She said, lifting another document. Because these financial records show over $750,000, moved over 6 months. Not a single wife signed or approved these transactions. And yet the note we saw yesterday, written by you, threatened financial punishment if they left. So tell me, Mr. Brown, was that frustration too? Kody's eyes darkened. You don't understand my family. You don't know what it's like trying to hold everyone together. The prosecutor stepped closer. You're right. I don't, but I do understand control. And I think this court is beginning to understand yours. The jury exchanged uneasy glances. The words control and power hung heavy in the air. Kody leaned forward, voice trembling now. I gave my life to that family. I worked every day to provide for them. The show, the fame, it wasn't easy. They don't know the pressure I was under. The prosecutor didn't flinch. And yet every one of them sat here under oath and told the same story, of manipulation, threats, and fear. Are you saying they're all lying? Kody hesitated. The silence was suffocating. He swallowed hard. They're hurt. They're angry. They're twisting what happened. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. So it's everyone else's fault? Kody slammed his hand lightly on the stand. No, but they never understood what it took to keep the family together. Control, the prosecutor said softly, turning back to the jury. He just said it again. Keep the family together. But how? Your Honor, by threats? By fear? By holding their finances hostage. Kody's lawyer rose to object, but the judge motioned for him to sit. The prosecutor was on a roll, and everyone knew it. She turned back to Kody. You once said on national television that love should be multiplied, not divided. Do you remember saying that? Yes, he replied quietly. Then tell the court, she pressed. At what point did you start dividing love and multiplying control? The words hit like a punch. Even Kody didn't have a response. He just stared at her, speechless, his confident posture collapsing inch by inch. The judge finally broke the silence. Mr. Brown, please answer the question. But Kody couldn't. He simply shook his head, muttering, you don't understand what it's like being betrayed by your own family. The prosecutor crossed her arms. Or perhaps Mr. Brown. They finally understood what it's like being betrayed by you. A sharp murmur spread through the room. Cameras clicked. The moment was electric. A turning point. Kody's lawyer called for a break. But the judge denied it. We're continuing. Mr. Brown, you've had plenty of time to prepare. Kody leaned back, visibly deflated. He rubbed his forehead, muttering something under his breath. The prosecutor closed her folder and faced the judge. No further questions. Kody's attorney rose, trying to salvage what was left. He spoke gently. Mr. Brown, you've provided for your family for decades, haven't you? Kody nodded weakly. Yes. And you never intended to harm them? No, never. Then what do you want people to know about you after all of this? Kody's eyes flickered, glassy with emotion. That I tried, he whispered. That I gave everything I had. Maybe I made mistakes. But I didn't deserve this. The attorney nodded solemnly. No further questions. The judge dismissed Kody from the stand. As he stepped down, his hands shook slightly. He didn't look at the crowd, or at his family. He just walked back to his seat and sat heavily, his gaze fixed on the floor. For a moment, the courtroom was utterly still. Everyone, the judge, the jury, the audience, could feel it. Something had changed in Kody Brown. The arrogance was gone. The control had crumbled. All that was left was a man watching his own legacy fall apart, piece by piece, under the weight of his own words. And though the trial wasn't over, one thing was already clear to everyone in that room. Kody Brown wasn't just losing a case. He was losing the empire he built, and the family he thought would never leave him. The courtroom was hushed when the clerk called the next witness. Christine Brown. The energy shifted instantly. Even Kody looked up, startled. For years, Christine had been his most loyal supporter on camera, the wife who smiled through every hardship, the one who believed in the dream of plural marriage even when it was tearing her apart. But the woman who stepped forward now wasn't the same. Christine, the world remembered. She carried herself differently, taller, calmer, with a quiet fire in her eyes. The kind of strength that only comes from surviving the storm. As she took the stand, she looked briefly at Kody. He looked away. The prosecutor began gently. Mrs. Brown, thank you for being here today. You were married to Mr. Brown. For how many years? Christine folded her hands. Over 25 years, she said softly. A lifetime. And during those years, the prosecutor continued. How would you describe your marriage? Christine gave a long measured pause. At first, it was beautiful, she said. We believed in something bigger than ourselves. Faith, family, unity. But slowly that dream turned into something else. Something darker. Kody shifted uncomfortably, his fingers twitching. Christine went on, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Kody started changing after the fame. He wasn't the same man I married. He became distant, obsessed with how things looked on camera. Off camera, there were rules. His rules. We had to act a certain way, say certain things. If we didn't, he'd get angry. The prosecutor nodded. Did he ever threaten you? Christine took a slow breath. Not physically, but emotionally. Yes. All the time. The crowd leaned in. The tension in the air was thick enough to feel. He used to say things like, "If you don't obey, I'll cut you off. You'll have nothing. You and the kids will be on your own." At first, I thought it was just frustration. But then, I realized it was control. A reporter's pen froze midair. Even the judge's expression softened. His eyes lingering on Christine as she spoke. She continued, her voice rising just slightly. "He made me believe that leaving would destroy our family, that I'd be the villain. But after years of being ignored, watching my children cry because their dad wouldn't show up, I realized something staying was destroying us even more." Her eyes glistened, but her tone never wavered. "When I finally told him I wanted to leave, he laughed. He said, 'Go ahead, Christine. You won't survive without me.'" Gasps filled the courtroom. Christine's voice cracked for the first time, but she didn't stop. "I did survive," she said firmly. "Better than ever." Kody leaned toward his lawyer, whispering harshly, but the microphones caught his words. "She's twisting everything." The judge immediately banged his gavel. "Mr. Brown, you will remain silent unless addressed." Christine looked at him, not with anger, but with deep sadness. "That's what he always did," she said quietly. "When someone spoke their truth, he talked over them, controlled the narrative. But not today." The prosecutor gave her a small nod to continue. Christine glanced briefly at the jury. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because I want my kids, our kids, to see what real accountability looks like. I want them to know it's okay to stand up, even when the person you're standing up to is your own father." Tears welled in her eyes as she added, "He taught us to obey, but we learned to speak." The entire courtroom seemed to exhale at once. The prosecutor showed Christine a document, one of the family's old financial agreements. "Mrs. Brown, can you identify this?" Christine looked at it and nodded. "That's the paper he made us all sign before the show. The one saying he'd handle all the finances. Did you understand what that meant?" She smiled sadly. "No, we thought it meant he'd manage the bills. We didn't realize it meant he'd control everything. Every dollar, every property, every decision." The prosecutor turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, this supports the testimony regarding financial coercion." Kody's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, speculation." The judge looked at him sharply. "Overruled. The pattern is clear." Christine continued, her voice softer now. "When I left, I had nothing. He froze the accounts. I had to borrow money from friends just to move. But it was worth it, because I finally had peace." Reporters were scribbling furiously. Viewers watching the live feed online began flooding social media with messages of support. #Stand with Christine. #Justice for the sister wives. Kody exposed Christine's composure was unwavering. Every word she spoke carried the weight of truth and the quiet power of someone who had endured too much. As her testimony came to an end, the prosecutor asked one final question. "Mrs. Brown, after everything you've been through, what do you want from this court?" Christine looked directly at the judge. Her voice was calm, resolute. "I don't want his money. I don't want revenge. I just want recognition. I want the world to see that behind the fame, behind the cameras, we were real people, and we were hurting." She turned briefly to Kody. "And I want him to finally understand what that feels like." The courtroom erupted in quiet murmurs. The judge thanked her and dismissed her from the stand. As she stood to leave, Christine didn't look back. Not once. Kody sat frozen, staring straight ahead. His face was pale, his confidence shattered. For the first time he looked defeated. As Christine walked out, the crowd outside the courthouse erupted into applause. She didn't smile. She simply took a deep breath and kept walking, her chin high. Inside, Kody leaned back in his chair, eyes blank. The woman he once called the heart of his family had just torn down the last wall of his defense. And deep down, he knew, her words would echo far beyond that courtroom. Because sometimes, the quietest voices are the ones that end up shaking the world. The courtroom felt like a ticking time bomb. The air was heavy with suspense. Every breath shallow, every movement deliberate. It was Judgment Day, the moment everyone had been waiting for. Kody Brown sat stiffly at the defendant's table, his jaw clenched, eyes darting between the judge and the door. The cameras outside were rolling live, and thousands of viewers across the world were watching. waiting to hear how the once untouchable man would fall. The judge entered, robe flowing, expression unreadable. Everyone rose. Kody barely moved. He looked exhausted, his earlier bravado replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. As everyone sat down, the judge began. After hearing the testimonies, reviewing the financial evidence, and considering the emotional and psychological impact on the plaintiffs, he paused, letting the words sink in. This court has reached a decision. Kody swallowed hard. His lawyer whispered something to him, but Kody didn't respond. He was staring straight at the judge. Face pale, lips tight, the judge continued. His tone firm but calm. The evidence presented paints a consistent and disturbing picture of manipulation, emotional coercion, and financial misconduct. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Kody blinked rapidly, shaking his head slightly. "That's not true," he muttered under his breath. The judge went on. "It is clear that Mr. Brown used his position of authority to control and silence the individuals within his family structure, often under the guise of faith and unity. Furthermore, the financial documents provided indicate that significant funds were diverted without the knowledge or consent of his partners. Christine, Janelle, and even Meri sat together in the gallery, their hands clasped tightly. The years of pain and silence were finally finding their voice through justice. Kody's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client." The judge raised his hand. "Sit down, counselor. I've heard enough." The courtroom went dead silent. Cameras zoomed in. The judge lifted a set of papers and read slowly, every word echoing through the hall. "This court finds Kody Brown guilty of financial fraud, coercive control, and emotional abuse under the Family Protection Statutes." A collective gasp swept through the room. Kody froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. It was as if the words had punched the air out of his chest. His lawyer dropped his pen. Reporters rushed to the doors, calling in the verdict. The judge continued. "Mr. Brown is hereby ordered to repay the misappropriated funds in the amount of $750,000 and will face sentencing pending review. Additionally, a permanent protective order will be issued on behalf of the plaintiffs." A murmur of approval spread among the spectators. Some people even clapped before the bailiff called for silence. Kody suddenly stood up, slamming his hand on the table. "You don't understand," he shouted. "I built this family, I gave them everything. This is all lies." The judge's gavel slammed down hard. "Mr. Brown, one more outburst, and you'll be held in contempt." Kody's shoulders dropped. He sat back down slowly, eyes glassy, face flushed with anger and disbelief. Christine looked at him one last time. Not with hate, but with closure. Her expression said everything. "You can't control this anymore." The judge looked over at the women and said softly, "This court commends your courage for coming forward and speaking your truth. Justice is not just about punishment. It's about restoration. And today, that restoration begins." Tears welled in Janelle's eyes. Meri nodded, gripping Christine's hand tightly. The judge gathered his papers. "Court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. For a moment no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Photographers rushed the aisle. People whispered and gasped as security escorted Kody out. His head hung low, his expression a mix of fury and defeat. Outside, the courthouse steps were flooded with reporters, flashing cameras and fans of the Sister Wives show holding signs. "Justice for the Browns. Christine, you're a hero. No more secrets." Christine, Janelle and Meri emerged together, side by side, not as rivals, but as survivors. The crowd cheered. Christine raised her hand slightly in thanks, tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. One reporter called out, "Christine, how do you feel now that justice is served?" She paused, thinking for a moment, then said simply, "Free." That one word hit like lightning. The crowd erupted in applause. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, Kody sat alone in a side room, waiting to be escorted out the back door. His lawyer tried to speak to him, but he wasn't listening. His eyes were blank, staring at the empty courtroom, replaying the last hour over and over again. For the first time in his life, the cameras weren't his allies. They were witnesses to his fall. Outside, as Christine and the others walked down the courthouse steps into the sunlight, something shifted in the air. Years of silence, fear and control were finally over. Christine whispered quietly to Janelle, "It's done." Janelle smiled through tears. "It's really done." The women embraced, surrounded by flashing lights and cheering voices. For them, this wasn't just a legal victory. It was the end of an era. Kody's world, once built on power and secrecy, had finally crumbled, not with a scandalous TV twist, but with the truth laid bare under oath. And as the courthouse doors closed behind him, Kody Brown, the man who once called himself the head of a family empire, was just another man facing the consequences of his choices. The world had seen the rise of the Brown family. But that day, it witnessed something far greater, the rise of the women who broke free. The sun was setting behind the courthouse, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. The crowd outside was still buzzing, reporters shouting, fans holding up signs, the air charged with emotion. But for Christine, Janelle and Meri, the noise faded into the background. For the first time in years, there was peace in their hearts. Inside the courthouse, Kody Brown sat alone in a holding room. The cameras were gone now. The spotlight he had once craved had turned into a burning glare that exposed every secret, every lie, every manipulation. His lawyer tried to speak, but Kody didn't answer. His hands were folded tightly, eyes fixed on the floor. The world he built, the show, the family, the control, had all collapsed in a single sentence. Guilty. Outside, Christine stood before the flashing cameras. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about truth. For years, we lived in fear, afraid to speak, afraid to be free. But today, we proved that silence has an end." Janelle added, "We were told to stay quiet, to protect the family name. But real families don't live in fear. Real love doesn't come with control." Their words spread across every social platform within minutes. Hashtags like #Justice for the Browns and #Christine Speaks trended globally. Fans from around the world flooded the internet with support, messages of love, solidarity and relief. Back inside, Kody finally broke his silence. He looked at his lawyer and whispered, "They turned everyone against me. The media, the show, my own wives." His lawyer sighed. "No, Kody, you did that to yourself." Kody leaned back, eyes distant. He thought about the early days, when Sister Wives first aired, when they all smiled together for the cameras, preaching love, unity, and faith. He remembered how powerful he felt, how the world saw him as the confident patriarch leading a modern family. But somewhere along the way, power had become poison. He thought of Christine's laughter, Janelle's strength, Meri's quiet loyalty, Robin's tears, and realized too late that what he called leadership was really control. What he called faith was manipulation. What he called family was his own kingdom. And kingdoms built on fear always fall. The bailiff opened the door. "Mr. Brown, it's time to go." Kody stood slowly, adjusting his jacket. The walk through the empty hallway felt longer than ever. The noise outside was faint, like an echo from another life. As he stepped out into the night, cameras flashed again, but this time he didn't smile. His face was pale, tired, almost hollow. The man who once ruled a reality TV empire now looked like a ghost of his former self. Meanwhile, Christine, Janelle and Meri drove away from the courthouse in the same car. The silence between them was warm, peaceful. They didn't need to speak. They all understood what this moment meant. Christine finally broke the quiet. "Do you think he'll ever change?" Janelle shook her head. "I don't think he knows how." Meri added softly, "Then we'll change for ourselves." They smiled at each other, small, tired, but real smiles. The kind that come after a long storm finally passes. That night, the news exploded with coverage. Every major outlet replayed the moment the judge announced the verdict. Commentators discussed the implications for reality TV, religion, and women's rights. For years, Sister Wives had been a story about one man's control, but now it had transformed into something far greater. a story about women reclaiming their voices. At home, Christine sat on her couch with her daughters. The TV played softly in the background, showing clips of the trial. Her youngest leaned against her and whispered, "Mom, are we safe now?" Christine hugged her close. "Yes, baby, we're finally safe." Across town, Janelle lit a candle and opened her journal. For the first time, she wrote not about problems or fears, but dreams. She wrote about travel, independence, new beginnings, about finding herself again after years of being someone's wife. Meri, too, found her peace. She closed the door to her empty home and smiled, not with sadness, but with strength. She whispered to herself, "I'm free." And somewhere far away from all the lights and cameras, Kody sat alone in silence. His phone buzzed with news notifications, social media posts, and headlines tearing apart the image he had fought to protect, but he didn't read them. He just sat there, staring at his reflection in the dark window, a man finally forced to face the truth. For the women, though, life was beginning anew. They had been silenced, controlled, and judged for years. But now, they had something stronger than fame or fear: freedom. In the days that followed, Christine and Janelle announced plans to start a foundation for women escaping controlling relationships. Their story, once a TV spectacle, had become a symbol of empowerment. Fans flooded them with love, calling them heroes. And while they appreciated the attention, they knew the real victory wasn't fame, it was peace. As Christine looked out her window, one quiet morning, the sun rising over the hills, she whispered, "This is what healing looks like." The wind was calm, the world was quiet, and for the first time in a very long time, the Brown family wasn't living in a reality show. They were living in the truth, because in the end, it wasn't the cameras or the court that brought justice. It was courage. The courage to speak, the courage to walk away, the courage to start again. And though the world would remember Kody Brown for the fall of his empire, it would remember his wives for something far more powerful: the rise of their freedom.